Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to another edition of the Wisdom Distillery. I'm your host, Shaman John. How was your Thanksgiving? Hopefully you spend it with the people that you love the most, or doing activities that you love the most. Hopefully you make it your life's goal to just do those things on a day-to-day basis. I think that's where it's headed, man. That's what all the cool kids are doing. Anyway, in this episode, we're talking with real estate mogul, 2020 real estate. I think it's called Hindsight 2020. Nikki Duncan. She's a friend of ours and also was our real estate agent for our house in Austin. And she has got many properties of her own, so she's working on building her own real estate empire. She's got some knowledge to deliver in that department. And she's also a singer-songwriter. Was heavily invested in that path for a while. It's quite good. Has a couple of records out, I think. Certainly has boxes of them in her garage, probably, like many of us do who are on that path. I've sold most of mine, thankfully, over a period of a decade. But yeah, quite accomplished in that direction, and I think she'll probably pick it up again, as one does, when one realizes it's the ghost that never stops haunting you. In a good way. So, please enjoy a conversation with Nikki Duncan. Welcome to another edition of the Wisdom Distillery. Today, my guest is Nikki Duncan, famous musician of long ago and real estate mogul of today. Mm-hmm. Right? Is that what we're doing?
That's what we're doing.
So tell me about, I'm going to start with the music thing because you know, we're both musicians and that's a good place to start. Good as any.
Wunderbar.
Right. So take me through your musical journey and take me through briefly why the switch? Why go from such a beautiful, creative, how did you justify that? A family?
A lot of different things. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to talk about me all the time,
Yay.
All day long. And espouse my opinions on pretty much anything.
Perfect.
So thank you. As far as moving from a music career to an other career, I worked in the music business in many different capacities, as a musician, as a booking agent, tour manager, many different hats, mostly as a musician, and I made records and played lots of shows and put lots of bands together, and I did it for a really long time, and I didn't do it with the acuity that I was missing some really integral pieces, because I was really interested in making a living doing it, and I just didn't have a business mind or plan. Yeah. I just loved the creative process, and I am still very musical, and I just today, and I haven't played a gig since probably 2012. I was just having lunch this week with my old guitar player, who's a friend of mine, who has since, in the evolution of my real estate career, become a client of mine. And he asked, when's the last time you played a gig? Because we're not playing anymore together. And I just had a moment where I was like, oh my gosh, I can't remember the last formal moment. It was probably with you. You should remember. But I think it was probably 5 years ago. And it's kind of funny that we're having this conversation right now, because I'm having a tiny little bitty renaissance. This is going to sound so boring. I was cleaning my garage a couple weeks ago, and I came across a run of a record that I had done, my last record, and I was looking at the cover and I was just checking it out, and I was like, man, I should listen to this, because I haven't listened to it in a while. I made it in probably 2005, 2006, and I was so blown away with what I did, and how I pulled it off, and I was pretty impressed with myself, and walked away just realizing, I miss this. This is something that I put on the back burner, and I don't feel remorseful at all about it. Because I needed a break. I worked really, really hard for a really long time, and as with the majority of people who play music and write songs, always had some kind of a day job to supplement my income, and I think that having to figure out how to do both at the same time, I just got tired. I got really tired, and I got really just, I don't want to say beat down, but I just got done with the grind. When I started, I couldn't figure out how to pull off, 4 side jobs, run a band, make money from music, book the bands, market the bands. It was just exhausting. Build a website, hire a website designer, have a photo shoot, hire the photographer. Because when you want quality product, yes, we do a lot of barter and trading in any of our businesses in the moments when we don't have the cash flow. But as I was stepping up my game, I needed to hire musicians, I needed to hire producers, I needed to hire studios and web designers and photographers and all of that stuff, copywriters. And it just got to the point where I couldn't figure out how to make enough money to fund all of that, and it got really overwhelming. And so with all that being said, I was also in my mid to late 30s as this was starting to peter out, and I'd been doing it for 20 years at that point, in many different varying degrees, and I was starting to have kind of a midlife crisis, and I got really contemplative, and because I was just so frustrated with being a musician in Austin, Texas. And I was also a musician in Portland, Oregon, where that's a huge music scene, and I experienced a lot of the same challenges. And, I basically just got really quiet and asked, I don't know how to really, speak this part of it, but I'm pretty spiritual, and I just went inside, and I just prayed, and I said, I'm not digging this. This is really
not working for me.
Well, at a point it was very soul crushing. Because I had all these dreams, and I could hear all this music, and I had the music, but I couldn't figure out how to raise $30,000 to make a really nice record, and that's just an indie record. That's not like the bigger developmental projects that I wanted to do. And my last record, I got really creative, and outside of actually creating all of the material, and I decided, I'm going to ask family for a little bit of money, and then for the remaining amount that it took to make this record, which was about $15,000, I went back to school, and I took out student loans, and I totally funded my record taking Spanish and yoga classes. So I wasn't going to school for anything of any, great magnitude, certainly not looking for a degree, because I was still very much on a music path. So I thought, how can I enjoy my life? And, I took out student loan at a very low interest rate and funded my record. So,
wow.
And I paid for that for a really long time.
That was the most expensive record in the long term I've ever made.
So I just got, I can remember a real pivot because I was always working in food service or in the bar and entertainment industry. And I turned like 36 and I remember just going, I was just doing all kinds of different stuff. Like I did, I believe her name was Julia Cameron's Artist Way, and I put together an Artist Way group. And, we are still, several of us are still friends today and very much like musicians. And ironically, I closed on a property this morning with one of my best friends who's also a musician, and we really sort of solidified our relationship when we were still musicians doing the Artist Way long before we had kids or any of that stuff. So it's kind of like, the relationship of and the evolution from music to real estate was a very organic process for me, actually. And it was, like I said, I got really in my heart, and I just was like, this is not working for me anymore. I'm not happy. I'm not fulfilled. Which to me now, years and years later, is much more, as I've deepened my own walk spiritually, I just realized that it didn't matter what the conversation was, that disenchantment lived inside of me. So,
sure.
I mean, had I continued to forge ahead spiritually and just kind of clean up my side of the street there, I probably would have been able to fully make an income playing music.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's a hard road, regardless of how you approach it. And you and I both have friends, and well, at least friends, not necessarily family, who have been doing it forever and really have very little to show for it in terms of economic success, creative success notwithstanding. But even that, it's like, we know people who just slog it out, who play to a handful of people in a room, every weekend or every other weekend or a couple times a month or whatever. And that was what I saw when I was doing that similar path in Arizona, was just like the writing was on the wall. Like if I didn't shake it up and really shift my way of operating in life, I would be in the same boat as what many of my peers or predecessors were, which were, 10 years down the road, basically playing the same thing. And that was the case. I revisited those places and those friends and would see them playing some art night, at a museum or something to, nobody, or passersby and that sort of thing. And I'm like, here, this is 10 years on. I've traveled the world and done all these other things and worked on these films and da-da-da. And I wasn't really pursuing my music, but I was still creatively engaged and really doing something that was very important to me, which was the travel thing, which was the exploration thing. And that was kind of the, I guess you could say the sacrifice, but when it came back to it, I thought, well, could I really let this go? Like, is this something that I can just, is this a limb that I can cut off? And the answer was no, especially when my son was born. It was like, no, it's really important. Music was a huge, huge impact in my life, and I want him to have access to that. And he's kind of been the catalyst for me to really get back into it, at least an excuse in many ways. But I feel like I'm now coming back into it with a much more discerning approach, and that it doesn't have the desperation attached to it
exactly
that I think it did before. And I think, and this was something I was going to raise in terms of questioning you, was, now that you're this on the other side of this, and you have developed a successful business in another capacity, and you have these sort of business skills, what we've noticed, if we paid attention to the music industry, is that it has changed dramatically. And the old approaches were money-based, primarily money-based. If you didn't have $100,000 to get into the game, you weren't in the game. Now we see bands who get signed because they've got a really rad Instagram account, or they're just handling their social media really well. They've got great visuals. They've got, all the kind of the ways to kind of build up the hype without actually spending a whole lot of money or a whole lot of, well, maybe they're spending time, but they're certainly not spending a whole lot of money. They're not traveling all over the place in a van and yada, yada, yada. I mean, some bands are still doing it, but I think there's a real clear delineation between working hard and smart and just working hard in the music industry today. And I'll go out to the Oasis and see there's a guy named Dickie Lee something or other. He's an older guy. He's probably in his 60s, and he's been at it forever. Like, you go online and you see these young pictures of him. It's like, my God, this dude has just been trucking, writing country music forever, and he's still playing to handful of people at some bar on a Thursday or Friday night or something, and you just think, man, that's fortitude. Like, I don't have that. Like, I want my music out there, and I I love that process of writing and recording and hearing that stuff come out of your head and put down into a medium that other people can appreciate. But to go out there and just pound the streets, day in and day out, and win a handful of fans at a time, and like, I don't have time for all that. I'm not interested in the blue collar musician life. And I just interviewed Craig Marshall, and he's doing it. Like, he's doing it that way. He hustles all the time, and he's always gigging, and he somehow makes it work. But I think, man, how long can you keep at that? So that's why I wanted to have you in here too, is that transition. But also talking about, like, okay, well, what are the things, that people can do to, especially if you're a creative. I mean, you went into real estate and you really sunk your heart, mind, and soul into this endeavor, and you've reaped the rewards, but it's not been without sacrifice, and you work a lot, But I think that on the other side of this, what it seems like is unfolding for you is a long game, which is going to soften your workload should you choose to embrace that choice of allowing yourself to reap the benefits of these residual passive income streams and get back to doing maybe more creative things, or just self-care and enjoying life and not being kind of running on the hamster wheel all the time,
And it's funny because one of the reasons why the evolution was somewhat seamless to me, and one of the reasons I've been able to stick with real estate almost I just had a 9th year anniversary in real estate, and I'm not after quitting, is that I just converted my community into a different. I'm very social, and I love engaging with people. Yeah. Like, it's just a really easy, effortless maneuver for me, and that's one of the reasons why I could work in the bar industry, and I worked for one company here in town for almost 15 years, but taking that social arena and just translating it into real estate. And that's one of the reasons why the brokerage that I'm at wanted me to work there, was because I had a very seamless transition from a huge network and community of people, and really in real estate I just converted it to learning my trade, and then becoming of utility to other people, in a different way. And housing is one of the fundamental key things that we need as a species. We need food, we need housing, and we need water. So it was meeting a basic human need. And so, I got really, like I was saying, internal. I had an exchange with a customer at the coffee shop that I had worked at for all those years, who had been my customer for over a decade, and he was a lovely man. And one day I said, and he was a realtor. I said, "Oh, Jack, I'm ready to buy a house finally." And he just looked at me with all the love in his heart. And he said, "Babe, you can't afford to buy a house in Austin, Texas anymore."
Right.
And this was in 1999.
Wow.
And that was really somewhat crushing to me. And I had already been kind of in this internal conversation about, where am I supposed to go? Like what, and asking spirit, universe, whatever, God, Allah, whoever you pray to. I said, please show me the way. This is not my jam anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without being too, pun on words. But, and eventually I had this conversation with Jack, and it was in October of 2000. Oh gosh, I'm mixing up my dates, but essentially it was like we had this conversation in like 2007 October. He said, I really think that you'd be really great at real estate, because he made this declaration that I just didn't make enough money. So I messed up. It wasn't 99. It was 2000 when he said that to me. And I just looked at him like, you got to be kidding me, dude. Like khaki pants and a blue blazer. Well, I was just like
tattoos and my
I had
rock and roll
always
hair.
Yeah, I had always been in the arts communities, and that was exactly my arrogant thought was, are you freaking kidding me? There's no way I would go be a nerd like you. And what I didn't know was that I can learn. I could learn a trade and help the people just like me and the people that they know and love.
Yeah.
Find homes to live in and make really sound, smart investments that they could leverage in the future. And that's what I did. Mm-hmm. I got really humble about four months later, and he just basically on that day when he made that declaration said, just saying, I mean, if you're ever interested, just give me a call. And so January 2008, I called him with my tail between my legs, and I was just like, okay, Jack, I'm ready. So I got my license, and later that year, my life is full of those coincidental, and I'm using the little air quotes right here that you can't see over the podcast, but those coincidental moments where people show up and they radically changed my life. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I was also ready. So in my heart. And so anyway, I met this series of people in my life right after I got my license. I started with a local company here called Hindsight 2020 Real Estate. And one of the reasons why they were so pivotal to me was that the owner of the company was just so not strange, that's not the right word. He was so esoteric in the delivery of his offer to me that it was very provocative. It was very intriguing. And he just wasn't... I went and sat in at a couple of other brokerages, and they were just really flat. Like they didn't speak to my heart.
Right.
And his offer was very dynamic. He is very committed to personal growth. He's very committed to education, and believes that there is a certain philosophy of care that has to be offered to people because they're entrusting you with probably the biggest purchase that they will ever make.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to be the leader in that conversation for them. And so he takes it very seriously and really is passionate about helping people change their lives through this vehicle.
Yeah.
So it was really easy for me to take my love of people, and yes, I don't write songs these days, but just this morning somebody hit me up on Facebook who's an old friend of mine from the music days, asking me to come out and play a gig.
Oh, nice.
And I'm just like, sweet, you know? So it's funny how, I pull my record out of storage start listening to it, give myself a few pats on the back for working really hard there, and then I have lunch with my guitar player, and then and I mean, this is all in the space of like a week, and then you ask me to come and do the podcast, and then this other person. I mean, it's just like it's the flow of the universe. It's the alignment of energy, and I don't mean to sound like some hippy dippy hooty goody spiritualist, but I really do believe wherever you put your focus is what grows.
Totally.
And I have for the last, the majority of the last 10 years put my focus on learning real estate. And my partner and I, we have pretty decent portfolio now, and we're after continuing to build it. And I'm in my I'm 47, he's almost 50, and my goal within the next 5 years is to buy a house a year,
Nice.
easily a house a year, if not more, and to continue to just build a portfolio in aggressive real estate markets, not just Austin, to put us in a position where, when we get a little bit older, we don't want to work.
Yeah, totally.
We don't want to work in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And yes, it would open up the capacity for me to do music. And he was a screenwriter in LA, so he's definitely passionate about writing. And I mean, right now we're in a little bit of the grind / jam of being parents,
Right.
and we're adulting really hard right now,
Yeah.
But I also see that real estate's really fun, you know? Like it's this market, Austin, Texas, has exploded in the last several years, and you can either be in a good mood about it or a bad mood,
Yeah.
I'm choosing to be in a good mood and just, I think what they say, what doesn't kills you makes you stronger.
Right.
So,
right.
it's just like the people who can make it through a very competitive market like this just become the cream of the crop, and my income shows that.
Yeah.
So
so if somebody was listening to this and they were considering moving to Austin now, given the market, what would you tell them?
come on.
What do they need to be aware of?
Well, I think that first and foremost, I know this sounds a little self-serving, but you should call me and we could have a deeper conversation about your situation, because everyone has different capacities. You know, some people are moving from California, selling a property that's worth $1 million, and here that translates to 2 or 3 basic homes here,
right.
And I would say absolutely 100% bring your money here and start creating a portfolio in a market that's dynamic but not as expensive as something like that. Some people may be moving from Minnesota, and they're buying their first house and they're coming from college. Who knows? I don't know.
Right.
But my offer is that I sit with my clients and strategize what makes the most sense, and I have a tremendous amount of capacity within my network of lenders and title companies and inspection companies and handyman and plumbers, and I mean, you name it. I've been doing it for a really long time, and we as a company vet the people that we choose to ally ourselves with, because if their philosophy of care is not ours, then they're going to there's going to be breakdowns, and I'm not okay with that. I want people who can take care of my clients and do it in a meaningful way, in a timeful way, and follow through within the integrity that I bring to the table. So,
what do you can you kind of go into more your view based on your experience thus far as using real estate as a wealth building vehicle?
Absolutely. So
why do you think it's solid, I guess?
I paused because this is a dynamic conversation. Why do I think it's solid? Because people need places to live, period. I mean, it just is not any more complex than that. And the stock market is fluctuant based on politics, and it is affected by natural disasters and things of that nature. And one static variable, the housing market is also affected by those things, but not quite in the same way. And I'm not going to pretend to even know how to talk about the stock market. All I know is that I have money in the stock market, and it hasn't done jack crap. I have 3 single family homes and 1 fourplex, and they've all made me a ton of money in the past 5 years. Yeah. So all I can do is point to what's been working.
Right. Yeah.
And the fact that I have a lot of different tools in my tool belt to leverage those assets if I want to be aggressive about growing my portfolio and turn them into other investments. And one of my colleagues just recently coined the phrase, have one of my houses have a baby, right? So once one of my houses goes up in value, at a certain point, I can look at leveraging the equity in that property, pulling it out through a couple of different avenues, like a home equity line of credit or a cash out refi, and I can pull that equity out, turn around, put that money down as a down payment on a new property. Now I've got 2 pots percolating on the back burner, right? Not just one. And I'm never after paying off my mortgages. Like, that doesn't interest me at all. This is how can I leverage as fast as possible into these low interest mortgages where I have tenants paying my mortgage, and I've got cash flow over that I can sock away for a rainy day when the AC goes out or hot water heater goes out, and then in 2 to 5 years, depending on where I've purchased those properties, turn around and dip right back into it, pull the cash out and buy another one. And so, and I'm in my 40s. I've got quite a little bit of time left to quote unquote work. And I'm after it. I'm not afraid to work really hard, but I also fell into a little bit of a pitfall just because I didn't have the knowledge or the education. In my 20s and 30s, I worked really hard, but I didn't have anything to show for it once I got through that portion of my life. And I had a baby in 2012, and I think that whenever we become the steward of another person, with the commitment that I have on the table to my child, I'm really committed to leaving. It's not about leaving a legacy. Great if that happens. That's not really my point. But I do want for her to be able to have something that she can either liquidate or start leveraging once I die, or geez, when I'm old and senile, she could sell it and put me in a home or something. I don't know. But I don't want to leave my kid in a position, or my partner, should I suddenly die one day, where they're scrambling to take care of themselves. I'm after living a good life, and that's not just the conversation of having money. It's the conversation of not constantly being worried about not having money. Totally. And that also gives me the capacity to circle back to the things that I love, which you mentioned. Travel, huge on my list. Making music, but right now making music, at least for the way that I commit myself, is a little gratuitous because I'm all in. I don't do the I don't do the weekend warrior conversation very well. I want to either be making records and, or selling houses. So, and I'll get to a balance somewhere in there. But, but I'm still very much a baby in this process. Real estate is really diverse. It's a very complex conversation when you get into the negotiation of properties and the different condition the properties can be in, and how to think about leveraging them into the future. So there's a lot I have to learn, and there's a lot I've learned, and I haven't just learned just the mechanics of buying and selling homes. I've learned how to be of utility to people. I've grown up. Like a lot of this profession, if you will, has pushed me into a position of wanting to be more emotionally present for other people and physically present. And that means like, how can I help you? Like,
more service oriented as opposed to what can I get?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, which is generally the musician's mentality. What can I get?
Absolutely. Well, because we're all living in a state of poverty and desperation and competition. And I think that, again, the spiritual conversation there is that there's plenty.
Yeah.
And when you get into a conversation of there is plenty, then abundance shows up.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
If you're not freaking out and trying to fight people for resource.
Scraps.
Yeah, resource. It rolls and flows. I don't know. I'm taking my licks too, you know. It's like just learning how to be even more dynamic and learning about the different vehicles that are out there. Like I have a friend who invests in apartment complexes, and that's a big conversation because those are multi-million-dollar projects, and they're not for the weak at heart, you know.
Right.
Some people just want to buy a home to live in, which is beautiful, and I'm all about it. And I wish that I had all the money that I spent on rent now to turn around and be able to put that into
some equity. Yeah.
That'd
What do
be
you
great.
think the you know, if somebody wants to invest in real estate as a wealth building vehicle, what are the things that people may be naive about or misinformed about right off the bat in going into this? How do they need to perceive, you know, because I think most people think, I'm buying a house to live in. And so I'm obviously going to be paying for my mortgage, you know, so I have to have the money for that. And it's just that sort of simple conversation of like, I just need a dwelling or whatever. But if you have broader agenda, you know, and maybe it is your first house, and maybe you do need a dwelling or a place to live, but how can you sort of reframe, like for us, you know, we Airbnb all the time, right? So we're making most of our rent just through leveraging extra rooms, and we were here by ourselves in this 4-bedroom house with empty rooms all the time with just literally nothing in them, or a chair or a desk or something in them. And so both of us were real inclined towards community anyway, and it made sense for us to open those rooms up and capitalize on them and all that kind of stuff. But we have friends certainly who would never even consider that, and so they're on the hook for, you know, $1,200, $1,500, whatever it is, mortgage a month, and don't really, they can't get their head around a way around that, a possible way to sort of minimize that or even eliminate that as an overhead entirely if handled. You know, obviously it depends on your lifestyle and your choices and that kind of thing too. But I guess the basic question is like, what kind of mental hurdles do people need to kind of factor in order to become successfully minded, at least at the outset, to be wealth building through real estate?
That's a huge question, and the place where my mind goes first is that everyone is different, just like you said, you know, and every person has different comfort levels. Like I just met with, ironically, my old landlord, who was my first real estate client. It was really funny. Wow. She wanted to buy an investment property, and she was so benevolent and was so gentle with me and let me, you know, she kind of like was my guinea pig back in 2008. And we had lunch yesterday, and you know, she owns several properties, and we were talking about her, you know, maybe eventually leveraging one of them to, she wants to buy a house in Europe, you know, and I was just like, oh, you should do this and you should do this, and she just looked at me across the table and leered at me, and she was like, I'm very conservative. And it's very funny to me because she owns so many properties, it wouldn't strike me that she was conservative. I personally, because I do this every day, feel very comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So I am a very aggressive investor.
Right.
You know, I'm not silly. Like, I do my homework
Right.
and I look at the numbers, but I'm all about like leveraging myself to the hilt.
Yeah.
Because at any moment I can just sell one
Right.
and not have to be worried about it.
Especially
you know?
in a market like this.
Yeah, and even if the market was not as dynamic, price mitigates everything.
Right.
As long as it's, as long as you're not upside down in a property.
Yeah.
And I would never put myself in a position to be that.
Yeah.
So, but she was very conservative. I'm very, flexible and more willing.
Adventurous.
I'm not as risk averse.
Yeah.
And so it really depends on, I spend a lot of time with my clients. I'm not at all interested in the transaction that we're having right now, meaning I don't need the money from the sale of this house that we're transacting right now.
Yeah.
What I need is a long-term relationship.
Yeah.
Because if you don't get taken care of in this transaction, every aspect of your concerns has to be addressed. And that means I have to spend my time and learn you and learn your concerns to be able to be able to provide value for you down the road, because this is a one-off. This transaction will happen and then you'll be in a home, right? But what needs to be spoken beyond that is that I took really good care of you, because you need to talk about me outside of this one event in your life. And then that provides, it's like a little, mushroom cloud. Like it just grows and grows and grows and grows. And that's how I've survived in a market that's really aggressive, and by taking care of people. And so to answer your question, you can't just say this is what you need to do to buy property or learn how to leverage yourself into the future. It's like I have to spend time with people and understand, who they are, what they know, where they will give me the opportunity to teach, and to be present with them at any given turn in the process. And really more of my job, I know how to buy and sell houses, but I'm a psychologist, man.
Yeah.
I have to spend time with people and walk them through, the process of not knowing what's going on or how to do things, and we're all human beings. We all have feelings about that. And I don't, I'm not gonna say one person is any more or less dynamic emotionally than another one, but this process is intense because money processes people.
Right.
And
Totally.
Spending hundreds of thousands of dollars all at once is going to freak somebody out. I don't care if it's the most seasoned investor.
Yeah.
And I don't mean freak them out, but we'll put them into a position to take pause. So I need to be able to stand there with them at any given moment. So to get to the answer of that question is, there isn't a tactical approach to this. It is a case-by-case basis of meeting people where they are, and teaching where they are willing to be taught. Because I've got one client right now who's purchased 5 houses in the last 2 years with me. They're after it, And then I've got people who buy a single family home and they're good, But I typically try, I know certain statistical data that most people don't.
Right.
Like, people move every 5 to 7 years, and or their life's changes come into play, which precipitates a move, right? So like, you have kids, you have aging parents, you have jobs that come and go, and so you may buy a house as a single person, but in 3 years it no longer fits your lifestyle, right? So I am only and forever addressing not what my clients need right now, but knowing that that's going to change, and wanting to help them get into a property that that I know I can help them get out of, or leverage for the future.
Right.
Like maybe, and somebody referenced in my office this week most recently, a stepping stone home, right? You buy your stepping stone home first, and then know that down the road, and I got a client under contract right now, and it's his first home, right? And it's not the most expensive property ever, but he's already like after it. He's like, this is going to make a great rental in a couple of years when we have a baby. So he's already
thinking ahead.
He's already thinking ahead. He's on board for it. You know, and I'm just like, excellent. That is exactly where I need you to be. This number that you paid for this house is totally going to be able to be rented for your mortgage, if not make you some money. So, you know, it just, that kind of conversation, it's just meeting people where they are. And then taking every opportunity to teach them what I know, to help them get to a comfort level of wherever they want to take the conversation.
What have you learned about yourself in this process of transitioning from musician to real estate investor? And what have you learned about others, people in that process?
Oh my God, that just makes me stare at you because that's a huge conversation. Well, I mean, there's been a lot of time that has passed. So if you're paying attention and you're after like growing as a person, and you know, I've learned that, well, I've just from an educational perspective, like I've learned a ton, you know. I've learned a whole new career,
right?
And what I've learned about myself is that I'm a pretty dynamic person, and I was when I was a musician, but I just didn't have the tool belt to articulate it into a dynamic business. So I this is also getting into the esoteric arts, but my horoscope, I'm a Gemini with a Sag rising and an Aries moon, which if anybody knows what that means, I'm a freaking hot mess. I'm adventurous. I'm a truth teller. I'm like a little butterfly who can't stay on one flower at a time. I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly being challenged. I'm constantly being humbled, you know, because there's a lot that I don't know. And when you're a one-man show, like I was a primary singer-songwriter. Like it was me.
Right.
I was building bands around me.
Totally.
It's like you got to have other people involved
to continue
network. To grow.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you know, it was almost like business partners. I didn't have business partners, and now I do.
Yeah.
And that's the juice, man. Why are we on this planet if we're not engaged with each other in a meaningful way? And I was engaged in music with other people. Making the music was beautiful, but I just couldn't figure out how to pay the light bill with it.
Right.
So.
And what do you feel like you've learned? Have you learned about people in this sort of thing of providing or helping to provide a fundamental need of shelter?
That everyone is after getting their concerns taken care of, you know, like, and that doesn't mean that those are selfish ambitions. It just means that everyone's looking for good help. And when people trust you and to take care of those concerns, you hold them precious, you know, like like I said, you know, money is a huge process for everyone on this planet, and resource is a huge process. And I mean that processing as in like it's a process internally for you, emotionally, spiritually, you know, taking care of your family. So I have to really slow myself down and make sure that I'm present for people, because if I don't, someone else will, you know, and buying, you know, a $500,000 house, like you have their attention.
Right.
You know, like they are doing something really, really big, and many things hinge on that decision.
Yeah.
Like, where does my child sleep? Where, you know, where do they go to school? How am I going to make this mortgage payment? You know, I mean, there's so many concerns that just fall under the category of housing, and this may sound superficial, but I've got to be in the right neighborhood to keep up with the Joneses. And a lot of my clients don't, you know, it's not that's not the path that they necessarily are after. They're after having a good life and being able to take care of their family. So I don't know where I was going with that so much, but
what do you, if somebody is in the, you know, in the market for a real estate agent and they need help with that decision, what do they need to look? What qualities do they need to look for?
Somebody who's going to take care of you and not be after you buying a house right this second.
Yeah.
Like, or buying an investment property or buying a commercial building or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it's, you know, you need whatever you need. My recommendation is find somebody who will put in the time.
Yeah.
You know, because it needs to be about the relationship, not the transaction.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just plenty of people are after the transaction, and then you never hear from them. I cannot count how many of my clients say, yeah, we bought our house and I haven't heard from my realtor since. You know, and it's like, that's, what a bummer.
Yeah.
You know, like, what an opportunity lost to not only be engaged with people throughout the course of their own personal lives, you know, like having babies and, you know, building additions on their house or whatever, like just getting to be present for someone else's evolution, but then lost opportunity in business where, you know, if you weren't around, they're not going to come looking for you. They're going to go to their brother-in-law, say, who do you know who can help me sell my house? You know, so if you're not present, you will not get the presents.
Yeah, exactly. With all the technologies and the platforms now for people to handle a lot of those things themselves and this sort of automated process that really multiple industries are going through, how do you think that's going to affect your industry? I mean, obviously the personal touch and the personal service thing still has a lot of play for sure, but when you're talking about commissions and things like that, and people start thinking, well, like, you know, I've got this what is the, you know, whatever the platform is, but like for sale by owner and things like that, you know, all these different outlets that you can basically just post your own stuff on and do your own marketing for. What would you say to that? You know, like that person who thinks, well, maybe I'll just handle this myself. Like, what value is the agent bringing to the equation that makes that? What is the percentage you guys get? 6 or 7%?
3%.
Oh, 3%. Okay, so like, what is the? How is that? As time goes on and these technologies advance, this sort of AI intrusion, going to make it worth it for somebody to still engage an agent? I think on the buying end it seems to make more sense, but it seems like on the selling end, there, you know, like, what are the resources that you're bringing as from the selling part of that equation that's going to mitigate somebody's desire to just go solo on that?
That's an excellent question, and we talk about margin of utility in the marketplace all the time at our office. Like, my broker, like I said before, he is committed holistically about training. Like, he's grown when I started with Hindsight, there was probably 15 agents. Now we're well into like 65 or 70 agents. And a lot of that is that his commitment to keep on the cutting edge of education and the cutting edge of his basic philosophy of care. I mean, you know, anybody from Redfin can come and open a door for you, but do they care about you? And it's not so much the touchy-feely part of it. Yeah. It's like, are they going to hold your concerns in the way that you do?
Right.
And so, yeah, the marketplace has radically changed in the last, just 10 years.
Right.
I mean, my mom in the 80s was a realtor, and she used to have to go brokerage to brokerage just to collect a key to open a door.
Wow.
Right? And there's no way that I could sustain a business if that's how I had to work.
Right.
So there has been a tremendous movement in real estate where, I mean, I'm doing it right now myself. I'm not a realtor in Asheville, North Carolina. I'm not licensed there. So I'm now the buyer who's doing all of my own research online. And when it comes down to, picking an agent for that market, what matters to me is who is after taking care of me.
Yeah.
Really. And I've run into, I found a realtor on realtor.com back in the summer when I was first looking at this, and I was in Asheville when we were vacationing, and that was my first pass. And, the guy was great on the phone, and then when we got there, I felt like a transaction.
Yeah.
And whatever. I mean, he doesn't, whatever. Like, that's the market. That is how most people behave in the market.
Sure. Right?
And I don't expect him to be my new best friend, but I personally think that, there's a lot of liability that goes into understanding the purchase of a home.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, there's a lot of value on the buyer side, but there's a tremendous amount of onus that is put on the seller as well.
Mm-hmm.
And our contracts in Texas are written primarily for the buyer, so a seller really needs to know how to navigate what they're committing to,
Mm-hmm.
and what they, what their disclosure responsibilities are with the house that they're bequeathing to someone else,
Mm-hmm.
So, and, just having somebody who is knowledgeable about how to create a pricing strategy and create an environment where you get the best buyer at the best price and sell the house in the most efficient way. Because if it sits on the market in a market that's hot, it's automatically blighted. Like, what is wrong with this house?
Right.
And unless you have a professional strategy and a strategist like me in your court, you're not going to be able to know how to navigate the pitfalls of transactions, and what do you say and what do you not say. And it's not about non-disclosure, it's just about making sure that you are being the best seller in the market too. And if you don't have a professional in your court who's looking out for your concerns, then you're going to make some mistakes, and they could be fatal mistakes. Like, you could get sued very easily, and we live in a litigious society, and especially when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think that anybody worth their salt is going to tell you that you should have representation on both sides.
Yeah.
And you can do all of the homework and flipping through, the internet, and that's awesome. Then pony up, get it. And in Texas, the seller pays for agency. So,
Yeah.
The seller pays 3% to their agent and 3% to the buyer's agent. So a buyer doesn't even have the encumbrance of agency. So
Right.
it behooves you to get somebody to represent you.
Mm-hmm.
And then the seller, doesn't, there's a certain amount of fees that a buyer has to pay that a seller doesn't have to pay. So I think that the way that the Texas Real Estate Commission divided up in fairness was that the seller would pay for agency and the buyer would pay for other things that they were responsible for, to sort of even the playing field. But as far as marginalization in the marketplace, like, I would never ever transact in the stock market without having a professional. I would never transact for a vehicle without, like, vetting somebody that I thought could take care of my concerns. I just wouldn't do that, like, because I don't know jack crap about that stuff,
Right.
And so, I mean, even when it comes down to, like, cutting my trees in my yard.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of a dork, and I will go out there and cut my trees, but I have to seal them and know to seal them, and then know where to, like, if I want to put an outbuilding out there, make sure to get off their critical root zone. These are, I mean, I would hire an arborist in most cases to come and tell me how to protect my trees.
Right.
Why wouldn't I hire a professional to take care of, I mean, a heart surgeon's a heart surgeon.
Right.
And that's what I am in real estate. You know, I'm the doctor in the room. I'm not a nurse practitioner, you know, and I don't want somebody operating on me who doesn't know what the heck they're doing.
Yeah, totally.
So
what would be some of your dream locations in terms of owning property?
for me,
Yeah.
oh, geez, don't get me started. Well, Nags Head, North Carolina is where I want my beach house.
What makes you interested in Nashville, by the way?
It's the climate.
Yeah.
It's the climate. It's an arts scene, good food, good art, music, relatively temperate climate. I feel like I shouldn't even be saying this in a podcast, so nobody else goes there. But it's also a very small community, and I've lived in Austin since '86, so I've seen a pretty radical
Influx.
shift through this community. And, you know, I'm not in a bad attitude about it or mad, but, you know, you change through life. And, and by the time, I mean, it's already, the traffic here is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And so, and I live Southwest, so I'm always in my car. So I'm ready to dial it back a little bit. I'm not ready to slow down right now, but when I am ready to slow down, I want to go to a smaller community.
Totally.
With a better climate, because Austin's amazing, but it's hot in the summer.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So, I mean, there, and those are the places that I've thought about here. And I'm still definitely filling my coffers, so I haven't really thought about abroad, but I don't know, I'll have to get back to you on all of my chalets and casitas and stuff like that.
Your Baja,
my igloos.
Mexico. Yeah, your igloos. So if people are interested in reaching out to you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
You can call me on the phone, you can email me. I would assume your podcast has some kind of email attached to it, or no? Or
well, I usually just have people speak what what the contact is, like what's your website.
Yep.
What's your direct email?
So my email is Nikki Duncan at hindsightAustin.com, and that's NIKIDUNCAN at HINDSITE Austin.com. And I say it very slowly because a lot of people don't understand. When I say hindsight, they think sight, like your eyeballs.
SIGHT.
Yeah. And it's SITE, like sight pad, like for a house.
Got it. Oh,
and it's
clever.
so funny because I can't take any credit for it. It's Charles Escutia, who's my broker. Amazing, brilliant, generous, beautiful man. And so lucky to be in this group of people that I'm in cahoots with at Hindsight. But it's so funny because so often I'll just think to myself, oh, hindsight is 2020, isn't it? Because I'll have done something and then look back on it and go, oh man, I wish I would have.
Yeah.
So it was pretty funny name for a real estate company, because especially when you're dealing with tons of money. So Hindsight 2020 Real Estate in Austin, and my phone number. Do I say my phone number? Or is that a weird thing? We'll just wait. Contact me through email.
Yeah, email's a good.
And then
just in case.
Yeah.
And is your music still available online?
Oh my gosh, I don't think so.
Really? So
you know what? I think it's on iTunes, but I don't know.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I just couldn't even tell you where you could find it. Maybe go find MySpace somewhere.
Yeah, but it would be under the same name, Nikki Duncan Music.
Yep, and I've got 3 records, and I had a jazz record that I was working on when I went into real estate, and I never completed it. But I think I have often thought I'm going to go back and finish that record. That's what I was primarily doing when I was the last 4 or 5 years of my music business was I was a jazz singer.
Oh, nice.
And
but I don't think I've ever heard any of that stuff.
Yep.
Mm.
Look at me, I'm as helpless as a kitten up a tree. There you go. That's all you get.
Wow. Have you ever heard a real estate agent sing like that?
Like that?
Probably never. That's beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
I
That's
bet
just
that
an
would
old
be a
standard.
great record. Yeah, I know it.
Yeah.
That would probably translate to a very good record.
Yeah.
You know, the glory of doing old standards is there's always a waiting and willing audience, so you can target them through very specific algorithms these days, thanks to technology, to like hit that audience who would really appreciate and support that endeavor versus trying to sell new songs and new
I'll make the
ideas.
records and you figure out what the algorithm
Do the
is,
marketing.
John.
That's right. We'll make $1 million. It was great having you, Nikki. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much. It was super fun. This was really cool.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it too.
Thanks.
We'll do it again.
Okay.
We'll talk about your casitas and your army of
little income producing houses.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully we'll be on the same track.
Yes.
Yay.
I'll come where you are, and we'll put together a big communal space there.
Yeah, big.
Because that's on my
gathering.
list. That's definitely on my list.
Yeah.
Yep.
That'd be awesome. Big vision.
That's in my bucket list. That's the top of my bucket list, actually.
We'll have to talk more about that.
Okay. I'm purposely not saying the place in case you're not disclosing.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir. So that was my interview with Nikki Dizzle, Nikki Duncan, Nikki D, real estate extraordinaire, real estate mogul, heavy hitter, knowledge bomb dropper. If you are listening to this podcast and you're considering moving to Austin, which I would recommend against because there are way too many of you motherfuckers moving to Austin right now. But if you must, give her a call. She can probably hook you up, help you out finding a house in this market. Slowing down a little bit, I think, here, but it's still pretty hot. Price is going up, man. Our house went up more than over $100,000 in less than 2 years. I mean, we put a lot of work into it, but the money's there, baby. It's happening. It's happening everywhere. Get in while it's hot. Anyway, hope you learned something, or at least were entertained for a moment, because that's what it's all about, right? Just keep us entertained. Don't get me started on all that shit. All right, man. From wherever you're listening, have a great, great day / evening / morning / weekend. And if you want to check out my music, it's shamanjohnmusic.com. It's a Jon in there. If you want to check out the music you're listening to, it's more of Otis McDonald, a.k.a. Joe, out of the Bay Area, San Francisco. And if you want to dance around naked, feel free to do so. Nobody watching. You can do it. Go on. All right. My next interview coming up is with an opera singer named Andrew Lovato. He was actually an Airbnb guest of ours here. And it's fascinating to learn about opera. If you don't know about it, there's a lot of rich history there. It's an interesting art form that somehow manages to survive in the modern era. No thanks to me, but thanks to Andrew. So yeah, stay tuned for that one. That'll be coming up soon. And then we're going to also hit up the teepee lady. Yeah, that's Wendy Green. She is a wild woman. I don't even want to spoil it for you, but she's amazeballs. So you're going to stay tuned for that one. All right, peoples. If you want to support this podcast, go to the WizDiz. Oh, wait, that's my email. Go to the wisdomdistillery.net. And there's a little Patreon page or a link to a page, and you can hit that and show us some love. And what else? Am I forgetting anything? If you want to hit me up, it's thewhizdizpodcast@gmail.com. And if you or someone you know has some great jams to throw down, and you want to get some promo for those jams, generally instrumental is better, but it doesn't have to be. It just got to be good, and I'm super picky. So you're free to submit if you want it to be included in this podcast as some of this opening music. I love to promote great music, but like I said, I'm kind of a prick about that kind of stuff. I really am picky. But if it's great, man, I will show you the love. Man, I say man, it's gender neutral. Apologize. Man or woman, or younger person of either gender, or neither gender, as the saying goes. It's the new age. So yeah, throw me some tunes, or throw me some links to some tunes, and if I like it, I'll include it and give you a shout out on the podcast. What could be easier than that? All right, peoples. Thanks for listening. I appreciate your time and your attention. Now go out there and do something fucking good with your life. Peace.